Today I want to talk about Lite-XL, which is a text editor. It bills itself as a fast, lightweight, and powerful text editing experience, and I found it to be true. So I found out that this text editor existed maybe a week or so ago, and I've been using it and just wanted to talk a little bit about it. So I've had people ask me in the past, what text editor should I use? I'm just learning how to code. And typically, the recommendation is VS Code, Visual Studio Code. By far, it's the most popular text editor, and it has a bunch of plugins, and it's very convenient to use. But I've had trouble recommending it because, one, it has lots of telemetry, which I consider spying, and also it's an Electron app, which, while it still has pretty good performance, I'm philosophically against bundling an entire browser just to have a text editor. And then, of course, while it does have plugins, it's got tens of thousands of them, and they could be from anybody, and you could have some supply chain attacks there. So the alternative maybe is VS Codium. It still has all of the downsides of the plugin editor, but it doesn't have the telemetry. But even then, it's still kind of hard to recommend. So this is essentially a replacement for this, right? For VS Code. Very lightweight, written in Lua and C. And it's actually worked very well for me. So if you click on the download link here, it'll take you to the Getting Started page. And it's actually cross-platform. It's for Windows, Linux, and Mac. And it has installation instructions for all three. I'll look here really quick at the Linux instructions. It has an app image, which is just, it should run normally if you have Fuse installed. But I would actually recommend the tarball. You can just unzip it and then run a few commands, and it will copy the application to the proper place. And then make sure that the path can see it, and that's it. You have Lite-XL installed. Now, for myself, I've actually created a keyboard shortcut in my operating system to open Lite-XL. So that way, at any time, I can just open a brand new instance of Lite-XL just using a keyboard shortcut. But that's just for me. So that's essentially Lite-XL, how to get it installed. I want to look now at Lite-XL itself. So here is an example of what it looks like. You can see on the left-hand side here, there's this little navigation pane, and I have my project LuaLibs opened up. And you can see I've got a bunch of, or just a few tabs opened. And you can move these tabs around just by dragging them and create new layouts for the tabs. If you close and open up Lite-XL, it'll remember where everything is set. So it'll open up all the tabs and have your proper settings, so you don't have to worry about setting things up every single time. Typically what I do is I have this essentially a two-column setup where I have some tabs on the left and tabs on the right, and then my on the right left-hand column, the file tree. In the bottom left-hand corner, there's some buttons, and those have some very common things that you might want to do, such as open a new file, or create a new file, open a file, save, search, run some commands. So it has this little command thing where there's lots of commands written, I believe, in Lua to control the system, and you can do all kinds of things with the command editor. And then, of course, on the far right-hand side, there's this gear wheel, which has the init.lua file. And that's the configuration file. So I'll just close this so we can just take a look at this. There's a plugin, actually, for the configuration that will actually make this a graphical interface. So you can actually control everything through a graphical interface. I happen to like the init Lua file, and I like Lua. So you can just put anything that you want in here. One thing that's really interesting is that you can create your own key bindings for things. And this just has a few examples, but you can essentially make any key bindings that you want. So you could replicate Emacs or Vim. In fact, somebody made a plugin that has Vim key bindings. So you can do whatever you want here, which is pretty nice. And that is essentially the interface. One of the things that's very interesting about this is that I haven't used it very much, but there are multiple cursors. So instead of just having one cursor, you can actually use multiple cursors to make edits here. And I know some people really like that from Sublime. And so that's actually possible here in Lite-XL. One of the things that I use very often is I like to be very focused and have essentially my one project open. So if I'm working on my Lua libraries, I'll have this Lua libs directory opened. And if you want to use a different or switch to a different project directory, you can just use Control-Shift-C, and that will bring up this change project folder command. And you can type in something else. So let's say I want to go into my utilities and maybe clib for my C libraries. And now I've got my C libraries that I can look at and review and change. If I want to go back, I can just Control-Shift-C and go back to Lua libs. And there we go. So that's pretty nice. One thing that's very interesting is that when you first open up, there's no files open. And it gives you this welcome page that has that tells you the version of Lite-XL, and it also gives you some shortcuts for some commonly used commands. That's very useful. So it gives you some nice things. Also, when you're running your command control or I don't know, command tab or something like this, you can see there's all of these different commands here. And as you type, there's actually more. So if you say like change project folder, as I type out change, that will happen here. And you can't see it because my face is covering it. But on the right-hand side, if there happen to be any keyboard shortcuts for things, they will actually appear on the right-hand side. So you can actually learn the keyboard shortcuts if you want through that interface. And that's essentially it. Those are the basics that you need to know. Of course, by default, it has syntax highlighting for several different languages. But the other thing that you want to learn about, which I'll switch back over to my browser, is that Lite-XL also has the ability to use plugins. So if you go to their GitHub page here and you scroll down a bit, you can see that there is the download for Lite-XL, but also there's a plugins that you can get, and also color themes. So if you click on Get Plugins, it'll take you to this project that has all of the plugins. And if you scroll through this README file, it'll show you all the plugins that exist for Lite-XL. And of course, as the community makes more plugins, they'll appear here. And there's lots of really interesting and good plugins. In fact, one of the ones I use, I believe, is called Brackets or Bracket Matching. It's up here near the top, so Bracket Match. And this one's useful for highlighting matching brackets. And so I just use that all the time, so I use that. Now, how do you install Lite-XL plugins? Well, there is the LPM. So if you install this plugin, it will actually have a plugin manager, the Lite-XL plugin manager, and you can just type this into your command box, right? So if you remember that command box that you had before, you can just type in LPM install and give it a name, and it will install that plugin. Now, if you want to do things manually, you can do that as well, and it's very easy. So what I do is I just clone this repository and clone it onto my local machine. So I have a copy of all of these things, right? So there's this plugins folder. And so what I do is when I want to activate a new plugin, I'll just click on plugins on my computer, and you can see these plugins are just Lua files. So you can just take the Lua file, like say color picker, and you can just drag that into the proper spot, and now you have your plugin installed. And where do you drag it to? Well, depending on your operating system, there's just a folder that you drag it to. And this, on Linux, it's in .config Lite-XL plugins. On macOS, it's here. On Windows, it's over here. So it's very easy to just activate a plugin. After you drag it in, if you have Lite-XL running, you'll want to close it and open it back up so that way it loads the plugin. But that's essentially all you need. And really what this LPM does is it just copies that file into the proper space like you would. So that makes it very easy. One thing is that these plugins, there's actually a generous number of plugins, and there's even plugins that can turn Lite-XL into essentially an IDE. And you can see that they've got a decent number of languages here where you can make it a C IDE or Java and so forth. And there's also LSPs, and there's LSPs for a bunch of different languages. So if you scroll through here, you can see if you like Language Server Protocol and you like using that for development, you can use that here. There's a lot of languages. There's also a bunch of really interesting things that you can do. So if you want to have some interesting plugins, you got them. I don't really use very many plugins. In fact, I only use that bracket matching one. But you can do whatever you want here. Also, there's a bunch of different languages where it has syntax highlighting for. So you can see everything from assembly to C to awk to Rust, whatever. You can have syntax highlighting for essentially any language that you can think of, which is pretty amazing. I mean, even niche languages like V, it's pretty amazing. And even like YAML and things like that. So very, very nice thing for it to have. So that makes it very easy to run the plugins. Now, let's see. Is there anything else? We'll go back to Lite-XL. So that is essentially, actually, that's basically it that I wanted to go over for Lite-XL. It is I've been playing around with it for a little over a week, and it's a very pleasant editor to run. Very lightweight, very fast. I really like Lua as a configuration language, and so that just makes it very pleasant to work with. So that is about it. I would say if you're a new programmer, try out Lite-XL. Even if you're a veteran programmer, this is very pleasant. Like if you use Visual Studio Code, maybe you have everything you want in there. But if you want something maybe that's really lightweight, very easy, very simple, and just fun to work with, try out Lite-XL. It's a great project. I wish I had known about this sooner. And that's about it. So great. Have a great rest of your day.